So now you can see all our objects lined up in a row, and you can see their relative scale and proportion next to each other. So we've already determined that this bottle is about 2 and a little over a half spheres high. Same with this one, maybe just a little less, etc., etc. But one thing I want you to notice about these objects is that they're all sitting on the same level. I can grab a guide and drag it down here. And you can see that they're all sitting on the same level here. So this is important because when we're drawing things, a lot of times they're not all at the same level. In fact, they're never at the same level. So what I'm going to do now is just turn off these images and show you a still life. So in this still life, it's the same objects. However, they're not all sitting at the same level. I'm going to drag this guide down to the bottom of the sphere, which is the lowest on what's called the picture plane, or this plane that we're seeing the scene through. I'm going to drag a few more of these guides down. This is the second lowest. You can see that these objects are sitting further back from each other. And as they go back in space, they will appear to get smaller. This is the basic principle of perspective. That as things recede in space or into the distance, they appear to get smaller. And they appear to become higher on the picture plane. We'll talk more about this when we get to perspective. However, for the time being, what I want you to realize is that as we move the objects back in space, they're going to appear smaller, so you have to adjust your scale to fit that depth. You do not have to adjust the proportion, just the scale, which is the relative size of one object to another. So in the case of what you've created in terms of the boxes, you'll need to make them a little smaller. And you can use the measurement again. You can measure against the sphere to see how large you should make them. But another way to do this, I think that's easier, is simply to use what's called aligning, which is to align the tops of each object using, in this case, a guide. But you can use a straight edge, such as your pencil. So you can see as I pull these guides down that I can see the relative distance between each object. So I can use that to roughly guess or roughly estimate how tall I should make, say, this object here. Remember, these two objects were just about the same height, but look how much smaller this one appears because it's further back on the picture plane. So now you have to adjust your boxes a little bit to fit the depth of the picture plane. Again, this is just a very brief introduction to the idea of perspective, but we'll be getting into that more in a few weeks. Okay, now for the next step in this process. What we need to do now is determine the positions of the objects relative to each other according to the image that I'm giving you. So I'm starting with my sphere, and I've put it way over to the left side of the paper because I'm going to need to put everything else in this area here. So I'm going to start by looking at the next object in relationship to the sphere, which is the jug. So when I look at the image, what I can see is that the jug is about halfway in the middle of the sphere, but it's quite a bit higher. Now it's not quite all the way up to the halfway point, but it's right about there. So I'm going to I've got just a single piece of tape on the top of this. I'm just going to push that in. So now the nice thing again about the tracing paper is you can see through it, so you can see the sphere still. But here's where the jug would be placed. So you're looking at the width and the height of the placement. Next I have the Coke bottle. And you can notice that the Coke bottle has some negative space between the jug and the Coke bottle. It's also a little lower, just a little bit lower than the jug. So this is where I need to kind of gauge it. I'm not being super exact here. I'm just seeing on the picture where the bottom would be, a little lower than the jug, and then looking at that negative space. Again, the nice thing here is that these are adjustable, so anything you do is easy to fix, easy to change. The next object is the wine bottle. It's a bit higher, about the same height in terms of how high it is on the picture plane, about the same as the jug, and then it's just a little bit to the side. It's not right down the middle of the Coke bottle. It's a little off to the side there. And then finally, my skinny bottle, which has some negative space in there too. It's just a little bit higher than the bottom of the sphere. So I'm looking at the negative space and I'm looking at the position here. So two things. If it's a little crooked, that's okay. I'll fix it really easily. All right, so now one thing I can see right away is I'm going to need to change the height of these bottles, because if this is the top, I'm just going to say that's the top of the skinny bottle there. I'll just draw a line right across that. It's okay if I draw lightly on the tracing paper there. You can see that I'm going to need to make this box quite a bit smaller for the wine bottle. It's actually right about there. So that's how much I have to reduce the scale of the wine bottle. And I'll just, again, make a line across that, just this right here. I'm making them very light. I'm trying to match what I see in the picture. The top of the jug is going to be a little bit further down. And then my Coke bottle, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I misdid the scale of my Coke bottle, because I can see here that it really should be a bit higher than it is. So I may need to go back and redo my Coke bottle box. But that's part of what we're actually after here is correction. I'm making corrections here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back and we'll actually we'll readjust the scale of these boxes, and then we will actually draw the objects in them. I know this is a very step-by-step process, but I'm hoping that it really gives you a good sense of scale and proportion and how things change as they go back in space. I fixed my Coke bottle, made it the right height. I had miscalculated it the first time, so good to make that correction. I've also marked the top of each bottle where I want to reduce the size of it. I not only have to reduce the size in terms of the height, but I also have to adjust the width as well. So to do that, it's actually fairly easy to do, but I'm going to take everything off the paper. So I'll switch back over to my other work location and show you that. So I've marked on the top of my jug where I want the new height to be. But in order to get the width properly, what I need to do is draw a diagonal across from the top right to the bottom left. I don't need to draw that diagonal all the way across, just so where it meets that new top line. That'll give me the new width of my jug. So it's important to do both of these, otherwise you'll end up with a distorted view. So I'll do that I only have to do that for 3 of my objects. So now I have my readjusted boxes on my paper, and I've been able to move my composition over just a little bit because the boxes being smaller has given me more space. So what I've done is I simply rearranged them on the page, and you can see how they line up with the original lines that I made when I wanted to correct the scale of the boxes. So with this piece being done, now the next step is going to be to draw the boxes, the bottles inside of these boxes. This part is going to use negative space, and we'll also use an interior axis line right down the middle of each of these boxes. Once we've done that, we can reattach them to the page, and we don't have to cut them out of the boxes. They are fine inside the boxes. So let's do that. And by the way, I'm doing this on my easel because it's easier for me to video it, but you probably want to work on a flat surface for this particular drawing. Not most, but this one.